it was suggested to us that we should probably do a dedicated meeting for Clyde. So unfortunately, we didn't do that before the pandemic hit, but we're trying to do that now. And we really appreciate everyone taking some time out of their evening to be with us tonight. Real quick, and our Joanna from our consultant office, PlaceWorks, will get into this more in a second. But Envision Contra Costa 2040 is our effort to update the county's general plan, zoning code, and climate action plan. And some of these plans haven't been updated in several decades. So it's really time to do that and to bring our planning documents into the 21st century. And so before I hand it off to Joanna, I just wanted to go around and introduce the county staff and our consultant staff who's here. There's Joanna and Tanya and Ricky from our consultant PlaceWorks. They just wave their hands. And then Daniel, Joanne Marie, Jamar, Maureen, Armando, Jody, and Lynn from Supervisor Glover's office are all here to also help out tonight. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Joanna for our presentation.
Great. Thank you very much, Will. I appreciate it. As Will said, I'm Joanna. I'm with PlaceWorks. We're the consultant team that's supporting the county with the Envision Contra Costa 2040 project. And we just introduced ourselves, and we want to start by doing a quick poll. Before we do that, though, let me just make sure that you know that we are recording this meeting to make sure that we have an accurate record of events, and certainly to share with any of your neighbors who aren't able to be here. So as we get started, if you could just take a quick second to do this welcome poll that should have popped up on your screen. Let us know a little bit about who you are and what's your relationship to Clyde, and also whether or not you would benefit from a quick Zoom orientation. I think we can go ahead and end the polling because I think everybody's had a chance to respond now. Everybody's a resident of Clyde, and a couple people are familiar with Zoom, but I think we do have at least one person who would like a quick Zoom orientation. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And just ask for the person who would like a little quick Zoom overview. We're happy to start off the presentation with that. Can you let me know if you're participating over a smartphone, tablet, or laptop computer? Because we have explanations for both, but I don't know. I want to.
Hi, this is Rick Duncan. I'm participating over a desktop computer.
Okay, perfect. That's really helpful. Thank you, Rick. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can see the presentation. And to this full screen view. So, except I should not have done that full screen view yet because I need to start you off at the beginning instead of the end. Sorry about that. There we go. So let me give you an overview before we get too far ahead of ourselves here. We've done welcome and introductions already. I'm going to give you a quick presentation explaining a little bit more about what Envision Contra Costa 2040 is, and then giving a quick overview of what we're calling the draft community profile for Clyde, which is part of the meeting materials that you received ahead of this meeting. And then we will also talk a little bit about potential land use map changes in your area, and I'll explain more about what that is. We're going to have some time for Q&A. In a lot of meetings like this, we call them small group discussions, but since you are a small group, we're all just going to stay together rather than go into breakout groups. And then we won't need to do a reports back because we'll all be together for the discussion, but we will close with some next steps. Okay, so this is the Zoom overview for a computer. Just very quickly, two of the most important.
I'm sorry, Joanna, sorry to interrupt, but I don't know if this is the way for other people, but I'm only seeing the first slide. It hasn't been moving. Is that?
Oh.
Yeah, so we only are seeing the non-full screen view. So when you went to full screen, it didn't share that. or when you went to the presentation mode, it didn't share that. Oh, there, okay. Now we see the right slide.
Okay, that is really weird. So you see right now the full slide controls computer?
I see the right slide. We are not, I'm still not seeing the full screen view.
Okay,
but-
okay, let me try the full screen mode one more time. Did that work?
Not for me. Else?
Nope, not on my end. I think it's just the connection overall for Zoom. It might be laggy for everyone.
Okay.
Okay, well, I apologize for that. So if you guys will just bear with me then, I will go ahead and just show this to you since the full screen view is not working. Can you see the entire contents of the slide? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
What's
We
showing
can,
me
it's
the
just
slide
not on the slideshow.
presentation view. Yeah, I get it. It does show me the presentation view when I hit that button, but it sounds like it's not working for you. So I apologize. Okay, so let me just enlarge it as much as I can here. The main thing to know about is the mute and unmute and stop video here in the lower left corner. That's where you can use the microphone and the little video camera icon to unmute yourself or mute yourself. Please stay muted until the Q&A and the discussion later on. And then start and stop your video with the little video camera here. You can go to full screen view with this little empty square in the upper right and change your view here with speaker view icon. If you want to change your name, you can do that over here in the right-hand column. You can access this right-hand column by clicking on the participants, the person icon here on the lower bar. That's how you can see a list of everybody who's in this meeting. And also how you can use the blue raise hand icon if you have a question that you want to ask. If you want to send a message to either project questions or Zoom questions, that's Tanya and Ricky. You can use this chat icon, the kind of dialogue bubble here at the bottom, to send them a question. If you're having either questions about the project itself or questions, technical difficulties with Zoom. And then when that opens up, you'll be typing your message over here on the right side after you choose who to send it to from that little gray menu pull down box. These other two slides are about how to do the similar tasks on the tablet. And then here, just quickly, is how you can raise your hand if you need to, because you are muted. So if you need to raise your hand because you have a question, use the participants icon and then the blue raise hand icon. So with that explanation, let me go ahead and give you a little bit of an overview about the project. This is called Envision Contra Costa 2040, as Will said, and that includes 3 very important long-range planning documents for the county: the general plan, the zoning code, and the climate action plan. And I'm going to talk about each one of those, as well as an environmental impact report, or EIR. So the general plan is the constitution for development and conservation. Like the Constitution of the United States, it has very broad rules that tell us kind of what we want to be like and what kind of principles we're going to follow, but it doesn't have every single rule that there is affecting land use and transportation in the county. It's really focused on these kinds of physical issues that have to do with land, where things are located, what gets built where, and making sure that there's roadways and other types of infrastructure and services in place to serve those land uses. It's really about providing consistent direction for future development in a way that balances growth and conservation and quality of life needs. One important part of the general plan is the land use map. And I'm bringing that up because we're going to talk a little bit about it tonight. The land use, the colors on this map show what can be built and where things are going to develop into residential neighborhoods, where land is going to be reserved for industrial uses, where land is going to be used for agriculture or open space. All of those ideas about the geographic and spatial locations of different types of development are decided based on this land use map. And then those decisions are further elaborated in the zoning code. So the zoning code explains how the county is going to look in 3 dimensions. It is the document that contains the regulations that say more about how things are going to develop, how they're going to be built. So things like parking or lighting, or how close buildings can be to the street or to their property lines, details like signage and fencing. All of the rules about those kinds of things are in the zoning code. And the zoning code has to be consistent with the general plan by state law. So the general plan has the big ideas, and then the zoning code has a lot more level of detail about how those ideas get actually built. The climate action plan is a document that's specifically aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions and just outlining the target for reducing greenhouse gas emissions that's consistent with the targets that have been set by the state of California, and then setting specific strategies and actions that can be taken to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from activities over which the county has some degree of control. The county does have a climate action plan, or a CAP, in place right now that was adopted back in 2015, but it's important to keep that document updated pretty regularly, because this is an area where both state law, including the targets that we need to reach, and the technologies and methods that we have available for reducing greenhouse gas emissions are constantly evolving. So we want to keep up with those, and we want to integrate this very important document with the general plan. So we're doing them at the same time in parallel. The CAP is going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but a lot of the steps that we take to reduce greenhouse gas emissions also have an important co-benefit of reducing other types of pollution as well. And to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we might be looking at efficient buildings, clean energy, ways of aligning transportation and land use decisions so that people don't have to drive as much or don't have to drive alone as much. And then also targeting the waste sectors and water sectors and the related GHG emissions there. The climate action plan is really being driven by the Sustainability Commission. The Sustainability Commission meets public meetings every 2 months. So the County Sustainability Coordinator, Jody London, is part of this meeting tonight. And if you want to know more about the CAP or get involved, her contact information is on this slide. And then finally, the California Environmental Quality Act, which is sometimes called CEQA, it requires us to prepare an environmental impact report, or an EIR, to describe any potential physical impacts that these 3 important plans might have on the physical environment. This is something that we have to do to adopt the plans, and it's a public information document. So we're going to go through and look at any potential physical impacts that these policies or strategies in these plans might have. If there's any mitigation measures possible to prevent or avoid those impacts, we'll document those. And then that document, the EIR, will go through a public review process for public comment and be available to the decision makers as they consider the adoption of the Planning Commission and the general plan. I'm sorry, the adoption of the general plan, zoning code and climate action plan at both the Planning Commission and then at the Board of Supervisors ultimately. Throughout the process, it's very important that we make sure that we're involving people from all over Contra Costa County. That's why you're here tonight, and we're really grateful for that. The best way to know about opportunities for public involvement is to visit our website, envisioncontracosta2040.org. That's where we will post any information about upcoming meetings. That's where we'll share drafts of documents when they're public. And it's also a place where you can communicate with us. You can provide comments. You can get on the mailing list. You can ask questions. And there's also online exercises there that you can do to provide additional feedback after tonight's meeting, as well as the public meetings of the Sustainability Commission that I already mentioned, and the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, which are continuing to meet remotely and to accept public comment in virtual meetings during this time of sheltering in place. So as Will mentioned earlier, we have had a meeting that included Clyde residents. And we wanted to start with somewhat of a blank slate to hear from you about Clyde's assets and also some challenges. So what we heard that folks really appreciate about Clyde and want to preserve and support are the small town ambiance, the quiet setting, the views of the surrounding open space, and convenient access to important transportation like BART and freeways. At the same time, Clyde's facing some challenges that we may be able to address during this planning effort, including odors and other impacts from the refinery and other local industrial uses. Sea level rise is obviously a concern given Clyde's proximity to the water. Maintenance of county parks in the Clyde neighborhood, and intermittent localized roadway flooding were all identified as some challenges. And we've tried to reflect both these assets and the challenges in the community profile that we prepared for you. So the community profiles are a new tool that we're introducing in this general plan update. Contra Costa, I think one of the most unique things about it is the number and diversity of unincorporated communities throughout the county that have their own distinct identity and a lot of pride about the place that people live and people feel very attached to. So we want to really recognize that and acknowledge what's special about all of those communities, including places like Clyde. So the general plan is going to include these short little segments called community profiles that explain to the planners and the decision makers of the future what's the character and the history of these places, of each individual community, a little bit about the demographics and the hazards and vulnerabilities that affect each community. And then based on that information and based on what we hear from you at meetings like this, we want to provide some guidance for decision making about projects that affect these communities in the future. So the profile includes some guiding principles as well as policies and actions. The Clyde profile you have tonight to take a look at, and we're going to be asking for your feedback on all of these components of the profile to see whether or not we've got it right, what else needs to be mentioned, how we can refine what's there already to make sure that it really reflects the character and the voice of Clyde residents. So part of what we're going to be going through is a little group discussion here shortly after you've had a chance to ask some questions. We're not, as I said, we're not going to break into small groups because we already are a small group, but we're going to be asking you about the various components of the community profile, including the maps, the guiding principles, the policies, and the actions. And also definitely want to hear from you whether or not you have any input on the context and the background description that we've provided to just help people understand what Clyde is like and what it's about. So Tanya, in just a few minutes, Tanya's going to be putting the profile and some note-taking sheets up on the screen for us and taking notes on your comments and thoughts. And then we're not going to be doing reports back. And we will come back and talk about next steps after we get finished with that conversation. So with that, let me stop sharing my screen and see if you, Clyde residents, have any questions that we can answer for you. And I think since there's only 3 people, I think it is probably okay for you to just unmute yourselves. If you all start talking at once, we can sort that out. But please go ahead and let us know if you have any questions.
Katie and Nick don't have any questions right now. We were the folks that attended the last meeting. Yeah, thank you guys again. And I'm sorry that more people weren't able to join. We have monthly meetings at our community center that are attended regularly by about like 5 or 6, sometimes 8 people. I'm not sure why more of those folks weren't here, but thank you guys for continuing to have this conversation with us.
Well, I'm glad that you're here, Nick and Katie. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming again. Go ahead, Ashi.
Hi, this is my first time this meeting. I'm new in Clyde, and I don't have any question at this moment yet.
Okay, well, feel free to let us know if any questions come up, and thanks a lot for joining us.
And my name is Rick Duncan, and I primarily wanted to tune into this meeting because I'm working with a group of people, a group of residents that are planting native trees along the Clyde pedestrian path. So I wanted to find out if there was anything in this meeting that might affect our project and working with the county on that.
Very cool. Well, I think it's great for you to sit in on this, Rick, because I think the minimum, I hope that it will give you a little bit of a better understanding about the various roles that the county plays in Clyde, including in things like pedestrian paths and access to connections with nature and land use decisions that might affect Clyde going forward, and who lives there and things like that. So I think it's still a useful conversation. And as we look at the profile more specifically, you might also have some ideas about ways that the language there can be tweaked to support projects like yours.
Mm-hmm.
Can I add something, Joanna?
Sure.
Hi, Rick. My name is Jody London. I'm the County Sustainability Coordinator. And one of the things that we're looking at with the Climate Action Plan is how we can do more to get more native trees into the county, because it helps a lot with anticipating climate change impacts and heat impacts that might accompany changing climate. So I'm really glad to hear you're working on that, and please feel free to follow up with me and get in touch. I'd like to learn more about how you're approaching your project and see if, I don't know what we can do, but we're definitely interested in knowing who's out there who wants to plant more trees.
Okay, great. Yeah, I would also add that, it also affects air pollution levels in Clyde, because the Clyde pedestrian path is located right between us and the refinery. So if we had more trees growing there, they might help dissipate or reduce the amount of air pollution that's coming into the community.
That's a great point.
Well, I want you all to feel totally free to ask questions as they come up for you, as the discussion continues. So with that said, I think that Tanya is going to share her screen now. Is that right, Tanya? So that we can start looking at these materials in a little bit more detail. And so Nick and Katie, what we're going to be looking at is really developed in part based on the input that we heard from you at the previous meeting. But I know that for the others of you, this is your first time being at a meeting like this. And so giving your kind of big picture input or ideas is also fine. We want to try to get some reactions to the materials that we've developed, but we're also happy to take your thoughts on other topics if they're not we don't directly ask about it here. So the first piece of what we're looking at here is the general plan land use map. So there's two different maps that can affect Clyde that are part of what we're talking about. One is from the general plan and the other is from the zoning code. Those two maps need to work together, but the general plan makes the foundational decisions about different categories of land uses. And this is the general plan land use map that we're looking at here. So this is based on the map that's in place right now. Yeah, and thank you for scrolling down, Tanya, because I can see the legend at the same time as all the changes. We may need to do a little bit of scrolling up and down or back and forth so that we can kind of see everything at one time. So the colors that you see on the map here are what's in place right now and what regulate land use decision making in Clyde right now. So you can see that most of the residential area is designated for either single family residential high or single family residential medium, high and medium, or to the density that's allowed. There's agricultural lands over to the east and a combination of heavy industry and open space to the west. So some of the changes that were, as well as some light industry kind of at the gateway to Clyde, near to Matco. So some of the changes that we are thinking about are what you can see here circled in black and called out with the call out boxes. The rail trail or the pedestrian path that we've already talked about, that would change from a public and semi-public designation to a parks and recreation designation, like the county park farther down to the south there, to indicate its recreational use. Change number 2 would be to change the community center site to a semi-public designation rather than a residential designation, since that is a place that's kind of open to the public and for public gatherings. Change number 3 down in the bottom would be changing the railroad right-of-way to a public, semi-public designation also. And then over in the area that you see outlined with the kind of magenta and purple, that's part of the buffer space for the refinery. It's currently designated for heavy industrial and light industrial, but it's used as an open space buffer. So a designation of resource conservation, which is applied to lands where the primary purpose is to protect some sort of resource, rather than to allow development or even to allow public access, would be, we think could be an appropriate designation for that. So those are some of the changes that we're contemplating, and we're interested in any thoughts or questions or reactions that you guys have. And I see that Nick and Katie have a raised hand, so go ahead.
Yeah, we had a couple questions. One was about like how these designation changes would affect the spaces. Specifically, the first one I guess that I had was about the railroad light. So number 3, does that, the right of way, does that change something there? Like, is the stop sign going away or something like that? Or
Will, do you want to respond?
Sure. Had to take a second to unmute there. Am I showing up?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Nick, no, the light wouldn't go away. Really, these changes, one of the problems that we've identified with the land use map is that it just has a lot of inaccuracy. And so a lot of it is cleanup. And I don't recall what the existing designation was. Was it light industry, I think is what it shows on there. So we just want to change it to make it reflect, to be more reflective of reality, quite honestly. So the railroad right-of-way, calling it public and semi-public, that's what the other railroad rights-of-way are in the county. So that's the reason for the change.
got it. Okay. And then all the other changes, the designations are essentially just reflecting the same. Like number 4 is not going to give us potential access to that space or anything like that, or.
Right, it's still owned by Marathon. So, and for that reason, in fact, on our current general plan, you can see at the bottom right, the bright green color, the key. So the bright green patch on the refinery, and then the key at the bottom, that's open space. We're actually going to be deleting that designation entirely and replacing it with resource conservation. And it's really, one of the reasons is exactly what you just said, because open space sends the message to people that it is perhaps a place where they can go and recreate, like Lime Ridge open space in Concord. And so it's going to be changed to resource conservation, which is more accurate as this is just a place that's being conserved in its current state.
So it's a grazing land is what it is. Okay.
I have a question regarding to number one. What kind of changes are you going to do in that area? You are going to change the area that people are walking to what? To park and recreation? How can you expand it?
So similar to the railroad right of way, we just want things to be a little more accurate, and calling it public and semi-public is sort of ambiguous when it's a walking path, really, sort of like a linear park. So we want to rename it or redesignate it as Parks and Recreation. And one of the other reasons for that is that when we look at the large map that Joanna showed earlier, the entire county, you know, at that scale, you can't see much of the detail, but when you zoom in, there are trails and paths like the Delta de Anza Trail or the Iron Horse Trail or the Contra Costa Water District Canal Trail, all throughout the county, but they're shown in the same color as railroads and other types of infrastructure. And we want to change these all to Parks and Recreation, which would be a different color, green, so that people will also get more of a sense when they look at the map where all of that trail and path infrastructure is across the county.
What happened to, I can see the map. Okay, thank you. My other question would be that if, when you say park and recreation, that means that you have to expand it because it is just there are only 2 or 3 people that can walk in that trail. And when you put it in park and recreation, you're going to make it part of the county, and then it's going to be open to other people from other part of the Contra Costa. They can come there. Right now, it is really quiet, and all of the Clyde residents are using that. By, I don't know, you changing that, are you going to make it more accessible to everyone? Because then we are going to have a parking problem.
Oh no, there's actually no physical changes proposed at this time, unless the community wanted some physical changes. It's just changing the color on the map, changing the designation so people will understand that there is a trail there or a sort of park-like space instead of just a road or a railroad corridor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I mean, we all know that we live here, and actually I see it. It is across the street from me, so that's fine. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We also want to use this time to ask if there's any other changes. You know, Clyde is one of the smaller unincorporated areas that we're working with. And the map is relatively straightforward to compare to some other communities. Like if you think of somewhere like El Sobrante or something that has many more parcels and roadways within it. So we always make time in these meetings to ask if folks have thoughts about any other changes that are needed or other questions or concerns different from the potential changes that we're discussing here. I'm not hearing any, which is fine. Again, any of this is kind of up for grabs at any time during the discussion. We can hop back to this, the map if you want to, or if other questions come up. Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
I'm sorry. One thing did occur to me that in one of the presentations about development of the naval weapons station, or the former military property that's on the other side of the freeway, I think they proposed a public pathway along the canal that would actually include the section of the canal that comes up to Clyde. So I'm wondering if the area along the canal will someday, or maybe it should be now, designated as possible future parkway space.
I think it's one of the actions in the profile. In fact, I think there's a policy and an action that get at this about connectivity to regional trails. So we've got the Delta De Anza Trail that comes over Willow Pass to the intersection of Evora and Willow Pass Road. And then it will be turning south and heading toward the new regional park there that will be constructed at the inland portion of the Naval Weapons Station. And so I was unaware of any proposal to bring a trail up toward Clyde along the canal. But when you look at the aerial photos and everything, you can see that it would make sense perhaps to have that happen. So, that's one of the reasons that we want to have a meeting like this with residents, is to see, is that something that people would be supportive of, a connection like that?
Yeah, I think it's come up once or twice in the next door discussions that when these proposals were made, I think there was going to be a path next to the canal, just like there is, in other parts of Concord, a bicycle pedestrian path that was going to come up along the canal, connect to the trail system that you were talking about, and then it would turn down one of the streets and then eventually connect into the main Clyde pedestrian path that's along the old railroad track. So, it was supposed to link up those two trails, but I haven't heard where that is in the planning stages, or if it's still being discussed. But I think there was a lot of support in the community for that because people, I think, want more places to walk and ride their bikes and everything. And especially if these two trails, the existing pedestrian path, could be linked to the canal, I think that would be a huge benefit for Clyde residents.
That's great. That's exactly the kind of input we're looking for. Thank you.
Why don't we go ahead and take a look at the other pages of the profile, Tanya, because it does, as Will said, it does start to touch on this issue and others as well. And like I said, we can always go back to the map, so don't worry. Let me just give first kind of an overview of all the pieces that are here in the profile, so you know what everything we have to work with, and we'll drill down into the guiding principles as a starting point. So Tanya, can you just take us to page 1 for right now? Thank you. So every profile starts with what we call context. And that includes a few images and a map showing some of the existing setting, as well as a little bit of demographic information, and just some text that kind of tries to give the reader a sense of what Clyde is like and what people really value about Clyde, a little bit about its history and how it got to be the way that it is today. And again, this is so that maybe 10 years from now, when there's a planner at the county or a new member of the Board of Supervisors who's trying to get to know the community, picks up the general plan and wants to understand, something to give them some information to support decision-making about projects that might have an effect on Clyde. They can read some of these words and just get a little bit more of a sense of the place and what it's like and what's special about it. So that's our goal with the context. And then in addition to that, we have some information on page 2 that is about important hazards and vulnerabilities. So as part of this Envision Contra Costa 2040 effort, we've prepared what's called a vulnerability analysis to look at both the hazards that could be affecting the county throughout the unincorporated area, not only in Clyde, but throughout the unincorporated county. And then also, how do those hazards potentially exacerbate vulnerabilities? So for example, a heat wave, it might be a hazard, but if the heat wave is affecting neighborhoods and areas of the county where folks are lower income and can't afford to run their air conditioners, or maybe living in homes that don't have air conditioners, then that heat wave is, those people are exceptionally vulnerable to heat as an issue or as a hazard, for example. So we want to include some of our findings from the vulnerability analysis and information about other hazards, because we see throughout California that issues of things like wildfire or flooding are very serious threats to many communities, and we want to make sure we're planning with those in mind. So that's another important part of the context. And once we've set up the reader with a little bit of background information to understand Clyde a little bit better, then we go into the guidance portion of the profile on pages 3 and 4. And that has some information about land uses. So that's the map that we were just looking at. We're going to have one land use map in the general plan so that it's all in one place. We anticipate that this will ultimately be an online plan. So you'll be able to zoom in and out and look at Clyde in great detail, or even your own individual parcel in great detail, but also zoom out and see how everything fits together as a county. So the map isn't going to be here, but there will be there's a little bit of description about planned land uses in Clyde here. And then we have guiding principles, which we're about to talk about, that provide overarching guidance, and then some policies that would regulate development. And then on page 4, we have some actions, which are kind of like to-do items for the county in implementing the ideas and the vision that the community expresses in the profile. So those are all the pieces together of the profile, and we want to talk about each one of them with you. I don't know whether or not you've had a chance to look at this PDF in detail before the meeting, but this is most of what we wanted to hear your reactions to tonight. So we wanted to start with the guiding principles. And these, again, are based in both on, what we as planners and folks familiar with the county know about Clyde, but also largely on what we heard from you as community members already. Words like quiet, tight-knit, community-minded, affordable, family-friendly, centrally located, rolling hills, safety, and also, protection from potential impacts from heavy industry. So those are some of the major concepts that we tried to capture in the guiding principles that you can see on Tanya's screen right now. I want to pause and see if anybody has any thoughts or reactions to those.
I would just say, I did not get the meeting materials beforehand. I just found out about this meeting at the last minute, but it looks fine to me.
Okay, thanks for that, Rick. I'm glad you're here and we're able to join with short notice.
Katie and Nick don't have anything to add. This looks legit. Yep.
It looks fine to me. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay. Thanks for noting that, Tanya. So let's move on to the policies. So the guiding principles are often easy. Those are aspirational statements, and I'm glad that you agree with them. I think they're often pretty easy to agree with. The policies are a little bit more of, where the rubber meets the road, to use a cliche. These are the kinds of statements that would regulate decision-making about development in Clyde in the future. That's my cursor. So these policies have to do with increasing coordination, especially among public safety services and agencies, about response times and protecting Clyde from accidents, prioritizing the health and safety of Clyde residents who are already living adjacent to heavy industry. Here's what Will was talking about in number 3 about expanding access to local and regional parks and trails, including a future Concord Hills Regional Park. And then requiring new residential development to be compatible with existing architecture and emphasizing the importance of preserving views for Clyde residents. What do you guys think about these?
My opinion is that number 2 should actually be number 1, because I think the refinery just has such, in my opinion, has such a major effect on the way we live in Clyde. Because when things are going on at the refinery, whether it's odors or flaring or whatever's going on there, I think it just has a major effect on Clyde.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was writing this, I would put number 2 as number 1 and number 3 as number 2. And then on number 4, there is one part of it that I'm a little concerned about, and this kind of has to do with our project to plant trees along the Clyde pedestrian path.
Okay.
You know, we've gotten some kind of some feedback from some of the residents that live along Norman,
Mm-hmm.
that very few of them, you know, just 1 or 2, that say they don't want any trees along that path because it interferes with their view of, in my opinion, it's the view of the refinery, you know. But I think if we have something in the policies that say we have to preserve our views, that kind of interferes with, you know, planting more trees in town. So, you know, I think that's a little bit of a problem, in my opinion, for our tree project. So those are my comments.
I have, my view is a little bit different, Rick, because I like to have the trees in that path. The thing is that the view is really nice. We see all trees and we see animals that are grazing. Regarding to this policy, number 1, I really want to know the distinction, because as I said, I'm new in this area and I don't know where to call, because I was told the first thing that we can call a certain number, we have to call the sheriff and all of those things. I think it is very important, especially when we come to the fire season, or it is, I saw flood. I didn't think about flood here. We need to have some more coordination in that area. But otherwise, I like what it is, how it is, right, and the importance of them.
So you're saying that it was a little bit unclear, maybe partially because of being in the unincorporated county, who to call for public safety issues.
That's true, yes. And that is the reason that, you know, I talked to a couple of the neighbors, and they keep telling me that there's a sheriff office, because we tried several times because of the smell, we had to call, but we weren't sure. I didn't want to call. I called 911, but not essential, non-emergency one.
Uh-huh.
And, but I like more emphasis on number one. And the rest of them, I think Rick is right. We need to have a safety for the number two is very, very important. And I don't know if there's any kind of policies happening that they are going to have more restriction in the naval office or not, but otherwise number three looks fine, and number four, as I said, personally, I think that we need more trees, that's true, but I like also the view of it, that it is the natural landscape and preserve the view. I like that part of it as mentioned there. Just
Yeah, I mean, this policy is focused on residential development, right? It starts off talking about require new residential development to be compatible and to preserve views of the bay. But I think it's a fair, so in my mind, I read it and it seems really focused on, physical residential development, new homes, if there were to be any. But I think it's a fair point that Rick makes, that introducing the concept that preserving views of the bay and other natural landscapes does kind of raise the visibility of, so to speak, of that as an issue. They're so often in planning and in making these kinds of decisions, we face trade-offs of exactly the ones that you guys are describing here. Do we want more trees or do we want more open views? And it is about a balance. And you often find in communities that there's a spectrum of viewpoints on these questions.
okay.
I did have one question. I think that maybe this was something that I should have addressed previously during the page 2 section, but I was wondering, it lists us as part of the very high susceptible to wildfires. And I'm kind of curious about our power grid because, when California was doing the blackouts this last year, we actually didn't experience any power outages. And I was wondering if you guys knew any information about that, or, could tell us like what our grid is connected to, like what the span of it is.
I see Jody.
I can try to answer that question. I don't know all of the answers, but I think that you are not in a super high danger zone. The risk assessment is here, the vulnerability assessment is here, but you're not. I think the areas that are more prone to be shut off are areas where there's a lot of vegetation and a lot of high wind. So in Contra Costa County, we find that the area along the hills from about San Pablo through to Orinda and Lafayette tends to be a higher fire risk. So that would be why you weren't shut off. And then because you're in the unincorporated county, the electricity lines that serve you are managed by PG&E, but all residents of the unincorporated county have the opportunity to be provided with their electricity by MCE. So if you're an MCE customer, your electricity has a higher renewable energy content than PG&E has. I don't know if that exactly gets at your questions. Is there more I can help with?
I can pipe in on one piece is that through the Office of Emergency Services, PG&E is giving us access to their GIS information that has grid level information. And we're just starting to get that in preparation for PSPSs that might occur in October. So we can try to follow up. We're just getting access to that now, but we can check to see what other areas are shared on that part of the grid. PG&E is trying to separate a number of areas so they don't have to have as wide of outages as they have in the last 2 years.
And just to clarify, PSPS that Maureen referred to as
Yep.
public safety power shutoff.
Yeah, I think what I would, if this were a higher fire danger area, I think it would be really important to be able to identify evacuation routes. But since it isn't, I think you're less at risk in that area.
Got it. I think that answers most of our questions. Thank you.
Mhm.
Tanya, let's go ahead and take a look at the actions. But again, like we've been doing, we're happy to jump around with you guys. So the actions, like I said, are kind of intended to be like a to-do list. It could be for the county, it could be for the neighborhood, the residents, but these are things that we're going to do to try to achieve the vision for Clyde that's expressed here in the community profile. So, for example, in support of a policy about prioritizing the safety of Clyde residents, we have at the first action number 1 about establishing a comprehensive long-term strategy to coordinate efforts from all the different regulatory agencies that have to do with impacts from industrial uses. One thing that we know is true, and this gets to the point that Mashid was raising, is that there is not just the county, but the fire district or the air quality management district or the railroad, for example. Like, there's a lot of different players that come into the picture when we talk about keeping Clyde safe. So clarity and coordination among all of those players is something that we've heard the need for. Similarly, developing an action plan to address impacts related to sea level rise. You could see a little bit about the flooding on the map a couple of pages ago. That's something that's going to affect many bayshore communities throughout the unincorporated area. Improving pedestrian and community safety through closing sidewalk gaps and incorporating better lighting. Again, this could touch on the pedestrian path issue that Rick was raising. Coordinating with the East Bay Regional Park District and the Contra Costa Water District to enhance connections with local and regional trails. So this could get back to the canal issue, as well as other trail connections and open space access. And then finally, working with the Public Works Department to improve maintenance of the county maintained park or parks in Clyde. Was something that we heard the need for.
I have one question and comment. Has the county ever considered, I mean, there are established bike paths and bike lanes along, I think, Bates, is it Bates or Arnold Industrial that connect to the Iron Horse Trail there in Concord. And I was wondering if the county has ever considered putting a bike lane along Port Chicago Highway, where it runs along Clyde, that right next to the town of Clyde, like that would connect to the bike trails, like along Bates and Arnold Industrial. And I think there's actually, I think there may even be a bike lane along Port Chicago, south of Bates. It just doesn't extend all the way to Clyde. And I think having a bike lane along Port Chicago would somewhat improve the safety of that road, because we do have a lot of problems with cars speeding on the road. And also I've noticed that some people actually, will walk along the pedestrian path and then kind of make a loop and then walk along the side of Port Chicago. even though there isn't a bike lane or, you know, room or a pedestrian walkway along that road. And people do speed on that road. I think the speed limit might be 50 miles an hour there. So I think, you know, having a bike lane along Port Chicago in front of Clyde would improve the safety of that road and be, you know, a benefit for residents.
Rick, I don't know if it's ever been studied or considered or not, but I think it's something that we can look into with our Public Works Department. Jamar, if you're still on, do you happen to know if that's ever been considered along here?
No, not to my knowledge, but I agree with you, Will. It's something that should be.
Okay, so we'll record that comment, Rick, and we'll follow up with Public Works and see if it's something that you know, might be feasible and that we can add to the plan here.
Okay, thanks. You know, I just, what made me think of it was one of these action items here that says enhance Clyde's connections with local and regional trails and open spaces.
Mhm.
And that would be one way to connect to the bike paths that are there, you know, south of Bates Avenue.
If I may, this is also good timing because one of Jamar's colleagues in our transportation planning group is working on a study to develop a better bike network in the county. So this fits in very well with that. Rick, I was wondering if, you know, you started earlier talking about the tree project that you're involved with, the tree planting project. Do you feel that these actions address the interests that you were representing with that introduction?
Well, it doesn't say anything specifically about trees in this, but is there a way to add one to this? I mean, we're not, you know, I'm just talking about a minority of people in Clyde. There are 3 of us that work on this project, and we've also talked about, you know, trying to increase the planting of trees, street trees in Clyde, you know, just along in the neighborhoods. So, I mean, that's something I'm definitely interested in. And I think the other 2 people in my group are, but I'm not sure, you know, what the interest is in the rest of Clyde.
Hey, Rick, Katie, and Nick are interested.
In my experience, Rick, often when you show up at a meeting and you voice things, you're speaking for what other people are thinking but aren't necessarily saying. So thanks, Nick, for weighing in, and thank you, Rick, for being a leader on this topic. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm always for the trees, so it is nice to have them. And Rick is very involved. I've seen him working on the trail. I appreciate that, Rick.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure we can add something. I think in many of the communities that we visited and talked to in meetings like this, folks have expressed interest in you know, different flavors or variations of neighborhood beautification, street tree planting, lighting improvements, sidewalk repair, all of those kind of things. So I think we have some good examples of those types of policies and actions from some of the other communities where that wish was expressed that we could add here in Clyde.
That would be great.
Thanks for putting that question, Jody. Do you guys see any other actions that you would hope might be taken in the next 20 years in Clyde that we should be thinking of that we haven't captured yet on this list?
To be honest with you, nothing comes to my mind, but I'm open to any other suggestion.
Sorry, I'm juggling a teething baby. Katie and Nick also think that this pretty well represents our thoughts previously and is applicable now.
Teething babies are enthusiastically welcomed as part of this meeting, so no need to apologize. Okay, great. Well, again, if you have any ideas now or later, it's not too late to add them. So why don't we take a spin backwards to the context section then? And just give you guys a chance to absorb that a little bit more. I didn't start with that because we want to make sure we capture the input on kind of the pieces of this profile that are going to drive decision making, which are the principles, the policies, and the actions. But now that we've had a chance to go through those, we also want to make sure that we're characterizing and describing Clyde in a way that really resonates with you and feels accurate. So I don't know if you guys can read this. Does anybody need this text to be larger on the screen? I know everyone's on different sizes of screens and different windows and everything.
It's fine for me.
Okay, I'm gonna just give you a quick summary of what we have here. I don't want to read it out loud to you. So we're just explaining a little bit about Clyde's setting, very close to Concord, and also along Port Chicago Highway and Highway 4, and talking about Clyde's roots as a company town, as for the Pacific Coast Shipbuilding Company, and then its evolution through World War I, and then of course World War II, and then the closure of the shipyards following World War II, and Clyde's development kind of as a residential enclave that's surrounded by open space. And then is there a little bit more at the bottom here, Tanya? So for each one of the communities in the profile, we've just provided these kind of little infographics so you can see in a glance how that given community compares to the county averages as a whole, and just kind of understanding who lives in this community, who might be affected by decisions that are made about the future of Clyde. It's pretty interesting to me to see that Clyde is very much kind of right at the median for a lot of the characteristics of the county. We work in some communities where people are much older than the county is average, or other communities where people are much less wealthy or much more wealthy than the community, than the county as an average. But Clyde's kind of right in the median points for these demographic pieces that we've pulled out. So let me just pause there and ask about kind of the words that we use and kind of the story that's told here about Clyde and its history, and get your reactions to that. Is there any piece of, way that Clyde is, that you think about Clyde that we really didn't accurately represent? Or anything you wish we would have said that's not captured here?
This is Katie. I grew up in Clyde, and I think that you guys did a great job of characterizing Clyde, and it's a very special town, and I think it's well written. Thank you.
That's really cool. Thank you, Katie. That means a lot coming from Clyde native. Rick, would you have anything to add?
It looks fine to me. Yeah, it's exactly the way I would describe the history and character of the town also.
Great. Okay, well, let's just take one more look then at page 2. That's another important part of the context here. And that's where we talk again about the hazards and the vulnerabilities. So just want to give you guys a chance to ask any questions about this, or make any suggestions for what information is presented or how it's presented to make sure it's useful. to you. So there's just a little bit of intro text about the vulnerability assessment. For each community, we've tried to pick a couple of maps to represent some of the hazards that might be most impactful in that community. Here in Clyde, it's flood zones and wildfire. Again, these are mostly natural hazards that we're talking about. And then we do also talk about abilities and how these hazards might change over time, particularly those that could be exacerbated by the effects of climate change. So there's a little table over there on the left about the major vulnerabilities. You guys have any questions or reactions so far?
It looks fine to me. One, human health hazards, what does that cover or refer to?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So that could, that might refer to, for example, health hazards that are like mosquito-borne illnesses, for example, that might be exacerbated by environmental conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Also refer to health hazards like asthma or heart disease or diabetes or cancer risk that can be exacerbated by conditions in our environment, like we don't have safe places to exercise, or if we're exposed to a higher pollution burden than other areas, for example.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, one thing that is kind of important to me
Enjoying chewing this.
that isn't really specifically identified on this, and I don't know if it needs to be, but you know, the Clyde pedestrian path was built over an old railroad right-of-way where they found quite a bit of contaminated soil.
Uh-huh.
And I think they've sort of, you know, reduced that hazard by putting this cap over the soil.
Uh-huh.
So I guess it's not really, you know, a hazard for us now, but I don't know if it needs to be identified in this kind of document or not.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, we will see what we can find out about the current status of that, whether any remediation has been done, and you know, whether that's still something that presents a level of hazard that needs to be acknowledged here.
Yeah.
Thanks for pointing that out. Nick or Katie, I don't know if you guys were trying to unmute yourselves earlier, but we'd love to hear from you if you have something to add.
We didn't have any questions or anything to add. That might have just been baby cries that we're trying to unmute it.
Okay.
I don't have any other question. Thank you.
Okay. Tanya, why don't you go ahead and stop, and I will go back to the next steps slide, and we'll just wrap up here quickly. I'm going to share my screen again so that you guys can see the next steps. Let me try one more time to see if I can get this to show you the full screen view. That work? Does that change it for you?
No.
That is frustrating. I'm sorry. I don't know why it's happening for me and not for you. But the headline here is Envision Contra Costa 2040.org if you haven't visited the website yet, please do. We're going to have our notes and record of this meeting there, as well as the recording of this meeting. Again, for your neighbors who weren't able to be with us, we understand that people have a lot of different commitments that they're juggling. So we want to provide other ways for people to be involved. And those are centrally located at envisioncontracosta2040.org. So there is a places on that website where you can participate online and answer questions similar to the ones that we've talked about tonight and about other topics as well. We're shaping these community profiles up right now with the goal of getting them to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors in the current months. And then the next major step in the process overall is going to be to also develop policies that will guide similar types of decision about development, about transportation, about public safety, about recreation and open space in the county as a whole, in the unincorporated area. So the general plan will combine these focus on individual communities like what we've been talking about here tonight in Clyde with policies that guide decision-making throughout the unincorporated area as a whole. And all of that's going to be having additional meetings, whether virtual or hopefully eventually in person again. The meetings and all of the materials are going to be available on envisioncontracosta2040.org. So again, please sign up for the mailing list if you haven't. Let us know if you have any questions. Put your neighbors in touch with us. And for all of you, Clyde residents, thank you very much for being here tonight. Nick and Katie, I know it's not easy to be the parents of a teething baby, so that's really demonstrates a serious commitment to the community to be here. And Rick and Rashid, thank you as well. It sounds like you're both really involved and care a lot about Clyde, so we really appreciate your input and your insights. Thank you very much for being part of this meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate your guys' time too. Thank you very much.
All right, everybody take care. Have a great evening. Will, you want to say anything else before we sign off?
Oh, no, just pretty much reiterate what you said. Please visit the website, and we really appreciate everyone coming out tonight and giving us their opinions and their input.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great evening.
Good night.
So,